Today's episode is sponsored by Future State Media, experts in off-Amazon traffic for Amazon sellers. Future State Media will build you a custom-made website to deliver sales for you on Amazon. Built to grab traffic from search engines and social media, your site can be used as a secret weapon for launching products on Amazon or just to stabilize your Amazon sales. It means you can also build an email list on autopilot. Go to futurestatemedia.com for your free guide to Google SEO for Amazon sellers today.
Ladles and jelly spoons, welcome to the show. Today I'm going to be interviewing somebody about a very important topic. So today I'm talking to Ben Chambers, who's the operations manager of Refund Hunter, run by SalesZoom. And they, as the name implies, deal with refunds for people on Amazon. And anyone who's sold on Amazon for more than 10 minutes will realize this is actually not a small task. This is a huge area where tens or even hundreds of thousands for a serious seller of your dollars or pounds will be locked up in Amazon, and these guys can help get it back. So, an important task. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
So, Ben, tell us a little bit more about your background and how you came to be working for SalesZoom.
So I actually come from an education background. I was teaching English as a second language, mostly overseas in Asia. I had a short stint in between jobs while I was back home in the US. So to occupy my time, I started working for an Amazon seller. And first I was doing the warehousing, packaging the product, picking the product. Then I moved into doing product listings, product photography, then started doing the reimbursements for the seller as well, manually filing tickets and finding these discrepancies. And then from there, actually, the owner, the Amazon seller, he actually had a friend who was just starting SalesZoom, and they needed an operations manager who kind of knew some of the ins and outs of selling on Amazon. So I got referred over the position, and here I am.
Excellent. Wow, that's quite interesting. I was just reflecting as you were saying that on, because I did English as a foreign language teaching as well, but I did that in the UK and other people came here. But it's funny how really competent people, they say cream rises to the top. So you started off doing packaging and stuff, and now you're in charge of, pretty major operations. So it just goes to show that people always rise. I mean, there aren't that many in my experience, having hired a lot of VAs. I've got one that's working for me in the Philippines, just absolutely does everything, legitimately asks intelligent questions if I've given him a very stupidly worded task. And but that's fantastic to hear. Well, that's quite a textbook rise. So tell us a bit about SalesZoom. So why, surely Amazon owes us money and refunds, they'll just do it, won't they? I mean, why does anyone need a complicated approach to refunds? Tell us more about why that's needed.
So the concept of it is actually very simple. You look at how many items are damaged, and you look at how many items Amazon reimbursed you for damaged. It's a pretty simple concept, but when you start throwing in, these items were damaged, but then Amazon said they weren't damaged and they put them back to a sellable position, or they were damaged and then they got lost, so they're reimbursed as lost. It starts kind of just exponentially getting more and more difficult. And then you start throwing in a customer return, items that weren't returned within the window frame, the 45 window frame that Amazon tells you to wait, or items that were refunded, but Amazon refunded the customer outside the window frame. And so you kind of email Amazon and say, hey, you refunded this person 6 months after they purchased it. You're not supposed to do that. And kind of just knowing there's quite a few different scenarios. And so you have to start cross-referencing, a plethora of reports, different time ranges. And so for any kind of seller, if you just have one or two SKUs, it's something that you can really stay on top of. But once you start throwing in 5, 10 SKUs and you've been doing this for a year, it's not something that you can do every single day. It's something that you can maybe do once a month, once every 3 months. You can have a VA do it, but again, you're not going to be paying a VA to be downloading reports every single day and just looking at the numbers. So this is where Refund Hunter really comes in. It's something that we are monitoring every single day. And if we don't find any opportunities, you're never charged. So we've had some customers signed up, and 3 months later, they're sending me emails saying, hey, I've not seen you guys send any tickets on my account yet. Is something wrong? And I'll take a look in and I'll tell them, we just haven't found any opportunity yet, but there's no reason to turn off our service because you're not paying anything. So it does have the benefit of no monthly fees.
Makes an awful lot of sense. Yeah, that's really very good actually, because most services make their money by having monthly fees or any kind of management service, right? Even it comes down to in the real world, the old property manager, which in the UK we have, or real estate as you call it there, and they oftentimes they'll take 10% of your monthly revenue for nothing. So yeah, that's really interesting to hear. But yeah, also the way you've described it, I'm completely convinced that I couldn't. No, it's not something I'm ever going to be bothered, shall we say, to do, because it just sounds horrendous. I mean, you know, I'm fortunate I've not had horrendous amounts of refunds money owed to me or anything too complex myself personally, but I know that people with accounts doing several $100,000 are literally owed $110,000, $115,000, particularly around sort of January, February time when Christmas has happened. Awful lots of stuff has happened. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense that you do want to outsource this. And just the way you were describing it, talk about using a VA. Sure, you could use a VA, but you're going to have a crystal clear process, and that whole thing sounds incredibly messy. So very hard to outsource. And that, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, my experience with outsourcing is that when it's a very, very clear, simple process, very easy to outsource and very rewarding. And when it's a really muddy like that, and there's a lot of edge cases that you just described, you know, it just becomes a nightmare to outsource, because you outsource it to somebody, they come back with a question, you have to then dig deep dive into all this data and then come out with the answer. And it's taken you 15 hours to do that, and then 5 hours to manage the VA. He didn't come out with the answer. So yeah, I've been there with all of that, particularly financial stuff. Great. So look, well, I think it's pretty easy to convince anyone who's been there for 5 minutes that you guys do something that they definitely need. So tell us a little bit more about who uses SalesZoom and what sort of, what kind of customers you got.
So the majority of our customers are actually Chinese companies. And the reason why is there are other companies out there that have been in the US marketplace already for all the US sellers that have been out, 5-6 years already. But for some reason or another, well, I think that the main answer is, to get a Chinese customer, it's very relationship based. So for a Chinese manufacturer, you can't just cold call a Chinese manufacturer and say, hey, I have this product, use it. Even if you can show them numbers or whatnot, if they don't know you, if they don't have any kind of trust with you, they're never going to use your product. So going back to the Amazon seller that I used to work for, he had a really good friend, and so he was trying all these different reimbursement products, and was just saying, hey, all of these, they're terrible. They get some, they get some of my reimbursements, but he's like, I know there's more opportunity out there. So he told his friend Ed, who's the CEO of SalesZoom now, and he said, hey, Ed, you can build me a better product, which is what Ed did. And Ed has roots in China. So knowing that there's a huge opportunity out in China, he kind of came out to China and started scooping up a lot of the big sellers out here, who most of them actually didn't even know that this reimbursement product even existed. So it was kind of like, it was like, oh, there's this huge gold mine out here of all these sellers who have no idea that there's reimbursement services out there. So we scooped up a lot. So we have a lot of very large manufacturers who are our biggest clients. For some of them, and the amount of volume that they're doing. So we just recently had an $89,000 ticket go through for one of our sellers. This was November 25th. So this is just a few weeks ago. But they're doing tens of thousands of units. But it goes to show that the largest manufacturers in China trust us with their accounts, because a lot of our ticket filing, we make sure we stay within Amazon policies, because Amazon doesn't like the ill research, the excessive ticket filing, these kind of things. So we, number one is, we make sure we stay within Amazon policies, as well as keeping all their account information safe. So that's kind of the main profile of our sellers now, but we're definitely trying to, reach out and, have this product out there for as many people as possible. So as far as reimbursement wise, of course, the higher volume you're doing, the more you're going to get back. The benefit for smaller sellers is that going back to that monthly fee, if we don't find anything, you're paying nothing for us to monitor your account. So it's kind of whether you're big, whether you're small, we feel that we try to fit the profile of as many sellers as possible.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One of the things, if there's no minimum fee, there's no sort of cutoff point below which your service doesn't make sense, really. So that's, yeah, makes complete sense. So question then, do you obviously support Amazon.com, I guess, which is in the US, Amazon. Do you support the European markets and other marketplaces around the world as well?
Correct. And Japan.
And Japan. Okay. So Europe,
So
US, and Japan.
Japan, North America, Europe. And we are working to try to get into the other marketplaces as well.
Yeah, and I guess for the majority of the listeners, I mean, depending on exactly who's listening, I never quite know. There's kind of got one download in every single country in the world if you look at the podcast stats. But yeah, I doubt there's going to be many people trying to sell in India or China, because although big markets, I mean, really hard for many obvious reasons. Right. Okay, great. So let's talk about we talked about the business as a whole that you have, the SalesZoom business and who you help. So let's get into the Amazon side. So what are the sources of money that Amazon owes sellers? What reasons trigger Amazon owing sellers money?
So there are three basic, I guess you can break it down to kind of three basic areas. One is the inbound situations. So the seller sending the product into the Amazon warehouse. So that check-in process, which is what most sellers can do whenever most sellers will reconcile their shipments on their own, which is, I sent in 100 product, Amazon only counted 90. And then Amazon is saying, well, we only counted 90, so we're only going to credit you 90, and, you got to provide documentation, whatnot, to prove that you sent 100 products. So there's that situation. Then you have the warehouse situation, products being moved around, damaged, lost. And that's the biggest area. The biggest one is probably lost. Lost is much more than damaged, as far as the units going along in the warehouse. And then you have the kind of the outbound situation. So that's more dealing with the shipment out to the customer. So then that's dealing with the product was damaged by the carrier on the outbound, or the product wasn't delivered to the correct address. The customer having a return. And so the customer return one is actually quite deep, because you have, number one, the customer gets refunded but doesn't return the product. Then from there you have the customer is refunded after the allowable window. It doesn't happen often, but on occasion, Amazon will actually give more money than the customer paid. Right. So, they only paid £10 for a product, but for some reason, Amazon reimbursed them £12. And you're kind of like, wait a second, why are they getting more money back?
Yeah. So let's dive into each area in turn, I think, if that's okay, Ben, because it can get a bit complex quite swiftly. Oh, yeah. This stuff. I mean, you've got to make sure people can hang on to it. So first of all, you said lost inventory is the biggest. Let's address the biggest one first, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the problem? What actually happens there? I mean, I suppose it's kind of obvious in some degrees. They don't know where it is, but I mean, what's going on with that, and what are the solutions?
Yeah, so it can get lost in any number of ways. For example, Amazon might. So you have to remember, within the warehouse itself, as wonderfully automated as we would like to imagine it, there's not these giant robots that automatically move these things around. It's, these warehouses are full of people who are picking up your product and moving it to a different location within the warehouse. And people make mistakes. They put it in the wrong location, or it gets left off in some corner and it doesn't get found. And so, just the biggest thing is, Amazon, you typically will find most of the product within 30 days when they realize it's missing. But that other 5% of the time that they don't find it and that they don't automatically reimburse you for it, this is where we're coming in and monitoring it.
So how do you find something like that? I mean, if I'm trying to do it myself, how would I find out, okay, by definition, they don't flag it up on the system because their system hasn't recognized that it's lost, or that something like that? I mean, how do I start finding it without driving down to an Amazon warehouse somewhere?
So in their reports, they need to keep an active listing of how many units you have. And so if they know you're supposed to have, for example, 100 units in this bin, and they go by and there's not 100 units in the bin, they would, if you have 90, then they can mark, there's 10 units that have been lost.
Right.
Then they'll go around the warehouse trying to find it. And after 30 days, if they don't, they're supposed to automatically reimburse you for it, which again, most of the time they will.
Right.
But it's those few times that they don't, and they can definitely add up over the course of 18 months, because Amazon will allow you to go back 18 months to reconcile these discrepancies. So, if you have 10 product going in every month, that's still 180 products that are moving around. It's going to one warehouse, they're doing a warehouse transfer, they're being sent out to customers. So the numbers can definitely add up.
Okay, so basically you need to look at the inventory report and see how many, if they've done a bin check, how many units they've actually found, how many units
Correct.
they're supposed to be, and whether if there's a discrepancy, okay, there's officially lost inventory, and the policy is they'll refund you if they don't find it within 30 days. So you're basically looking for a discrepancy between that missing bin check number of units and whether they paid you for it or not.
Correct.
That already does sound like a giant pain that I would really like to do frequently. I mean, I have to say, I'm sure that Amazon owes me some money from some past things based on this conversation, but I don't think it's been enough to be painful. But yeah, it does sound like a painful process. Okay, so basically you look at the lost report and the found report, and what specific for those who want to do DIY, because some people are very into their details. So what are the exact reports you need to look at to solve that one?
So this one is the inventory adjustments report.
Inventory adjustments, all right.
So inventory adjustments is the report that is showing everything that's happening inside of Amazon's warehouses.
Right.
So there are two reports. You have an inventory event report and an inventory adjustment. Inventory event is kind of, if you imagine the warehouse and things going in and out of the warehouse.
Right.
The inventory adjustment is everything that's happening within the warehouse itself. So that's damaged items, lost items. So the most complicated part with the lost is the holding account. I don't know if you're too familiar with your holding accounts.
I have no idea about holding accounts, so do tell me more.
The holding accounts is, the best way that I can describe it is Amazon's magic bucket that they use to give you physical inventory. It's a complicated mess, but it's something that you, again, if you just straight up look at your inventory adjustment reports and you only look at lost and found, Amazon will say, oh, you also need to look at your holding account, and you also need to look at relabeling of product. So there's, for the lost and found, you actually have to look at about 5 different categories to reconcile just lost and found.
Ooh, that sounds really nasty, I have to say. I mean,
it does.
Most of the time with this, my approach to most of this stuff is to try to get experts on to give, good content. And should people wish to use their service, then, they do. And in most cases they don't. That's fine. And we're not into heavy pitches because I don't think it's effective for anyone. We're trying to provide value and interest for all the listeners all the time. This, I have to say, this comes to one of those services where I personally would just be grateful to just hand it off to somebody and not know how it's done, because it just sounds very painful from what you're describing. But having said that, we should dig in. So those who want to do stuff themselves, because a lot of people want to create in-house systems and use a VA, and it's fair enough. We ought to dig into it, but that's just, I have to say that anyone, again, who's dug around for more than 5 minutes in the back end of Amazon with the inventory side, is just a whole different world of reports. Many of which, as you say, do not do what they seem to do on the surface, because you've got these magical things, like, as you said, the holding account that throws everything else into question. Yeah. So it's a kind of not exactly fiction, is based on reality, but it's not as based as you'd like somehow, is it? Like a lot. Right. Yeah. So look, let's talk about some DIY solutions where people would say 10 to 20 SKUs, because it sort of starts to get to the point where you're really going to have to outsource there, I guess. What's the easiest? So we'll talk about so that we've got the 3 areas: the lost inventory, customer returns, inbound shipments. Let's deal with the lost stuff first. What's the simplest way to cut through all these things? What's the sort of simplest possible path through? So
the simplest way is, I actually made a kind of a demo video. I don't know if maybe later I can give you a link to this online video and you can include it in the podcast.
That would be perfect. Let's do that.
I actually made it just for this podcast.
Oh, that's very kind.
Included.
Yeah, amazing. Yes, that would be
kind of I think it's about an 11-minute walkthrough of downloading the reports, and I make a pivot table in Microsoft Excel. And so from Excel, you can kind of quickly move all these different fields around. So you can choose these categories, and then you can kind of get this sum number at the end, and then compare it with the reimbursement report.
Okay.
And that video, it's a very watered down version, of the very simple, this is lost, this is found, this is reimbursed. It does get deeper, but in the simplest form, it gives you a basic idea of how you can start doing this yourself, especially if you don't have a lot of SKUs. Because I even tell when I go to some of these meetups and I meet some sellers who are just starting, I always tell them, do it yourself for a couple months, because to really learn how the process goes and to see what Amazon's doing. Eventually, you'll reach a point where you'll just say, I'm tired of doing this myself, and then that's whenever you sign up with Refund Hunter.
Interesting. But I like that advice. I think, and first of all, I mean, props to you for actually, as a service provider, for saying do this service yourself. That's unusual to hear, but I also think it's quite the right way to do it, because whenever I outsource something that I haven't done myself, however badly, I don't understand the process enough, and then I have either unreasonable expectations that people can make magic happen when they can't,
right? Or
I overpay for a service that actually is very simple and I can get a VA to do. In this case, it sounds like the opposite extreme, but it's really great advice. And thank you. We will definitely put the video up. So just if you're listening to this, get over to the podcast. For the moment, we use Amazing FBA links because it's simple. AmazingFBA.com/sales zoom, SALESZ or ZOON for mother. So we'll put up this interview there, and we'll put up definitely a link to the video. I was just thinking, this sounds like a job for a video. So you've been there before us. It's very kind of you. Thank you. So can you talk, for those who are podcast listeners at the moment, can you talk us through the sort of very sort of basics without obviously doing the pivot table by words only? That would be a bit scary.
So you download. So I don't know if you're familiar with the inventory codes. Are you?
Not really, no. Sorry, I feel very ignorant suddenly. I do actually sound
like...
No. I don't know any of this stuff.
If you don't actually, I mean, it's something that's it's buried away, that if you don't look it up, you'll never come across it in your just regular Amazon selling daily life. So Amazon uses letters and codes for their inventory movements and descriptions. So Amazon uses category F for found and M for misplaced. So essentially you just take your SKU and you punch in a date. So when you're downloading the report, you can put in a date range. Again, so this is for a downloaded report, not the online. When you look online, it's a little bit cleaner. The limitation is you're only allowed 50 lines of events, and it's harder to sort through. So in a downloaded version, you're essentially just taking, you have a SKU A, and you would just line up for the last 18 months, there have been 100 lost events and 98 found events. You would take those numbers and then you would cross-reference with the reimbursement report, and you'll just see how many times has Amazon reimbursed me for SKU A for the reason lost warehouse. And if that number doesn't equal out to your total 100 lost, then you would just file a ticket and you would give Amazon the details. Here's the 100 lost events, here's the 98 found events, and there are no reimbursement events for lost warehouse. You need to give me reimbursement for 2. And essentially Amazon will look at the details and say, we agree, here's reimbursement for 2 products.
Right.
And then you do the same thing for the damage. You would go to choose the damage category and do the exact same process, compare it with the reimbursement report, and find the difference.
Right. Excellent. Well, I think your video is going to be pretty handy for that, because as I said, we've touched on it, but this could be a very good case, folks. So if you're listening in your car, do not click now through to the video, because I don't want to be responsible for your road accidents. But yeah, I definitely want to check out. That's very kind of you to do that. So let's come back then to things getting lost is obviously very big. The other things you mentioned were inbound shipments and customer returns. Let's deal with inbound shipments first, because that sounds to me like it's going to be slightly simpler.
It's much simpler because Amazon already makes it very simple for you to do through their interface. Because just when you go through your inbound shipment reconciliation page after your shipment has checked in, and I think Amazon makes you wait 14 days after the first product comes in before they kind of show you any numbers, which I know so that there's probably going to be a lot of sellers out there who've way more experience than I am. But whenever I was working for Titan Rig last year, about a year and a half ago, the reconciliation process was super easy. Amazon almost never required any kind of paperwork. They just took your word for it. If you're like, I sent you 100, you only counted 95, they'll be like, sure, here's reimbursement for 5 products.
Yeah.
The last year or so, they're making it very hard now. Now they're, hey, I sent you 1,000, you counted 999, and now Amazon is asking you to send them a manufacturer invoice to prove that you purchased 1,000 products. And you're kind of like, really? Like, you think I really purchased 999, and then I sent you, I told you I sent 1,000. So the harder part is having these manufacturer invoices, having the stamped proof of delivery that has Amazon's stamp on it. So they're making it a bit harder. So for the lost inbound, if you're a very organized seller and you have all of this paperwork, it's the easiest way to get your money back. The hard part is if you are not organized and you don't have these manufacturer invoices, you don't have these recorded Amazon stamped proof of deliveries. That's where you're going to see a lot of your money just go down the drain because you didn't have these documents.
Yeah, I mean, manufacturer invoice, almost everyone's going to have somewhere, I guess, unless they're really seriously disorganized. But what is this stamped proof of delivery? That, again, I've never come across or heard of that.
So whenever your product gets delivered, there should be what Amazon wants to see is a physical piece of paper that upon check-in, an Amazon agent, maybe I'll send you over a picture of an example, one of these as well.
That's great. We can put that in the show notes.
It's the stamp that says Amazon on it, and it says how many packages or boxes were received, and they will write down the number. And so it's the Amazon agent verifying in this shipment, yes, we did receive 108 boxes.
Okay, and how do we, as the sellers, get hold of this lovely document?
You are supposed to get it from your logistics provider. So whoever you are using is supposed to have this. I've had this argument with Amazon many, many times because Amazon will say, oh, you need to show us this. And I've had phone calls with Amazon where I said, you also have to have a copy. There is no way that you as Amazon does not have a copy of this. And then the Amazon agents I talk to say, we do have it, but it's not our responsibility to show it.
Oh, wow. So they actually have the paperwork and they're refusing to show it.
Yeah. They're just making the sellers jump through extra hoops.
Yeah. Well, I guess that is just a way of hanging on to their money, isn't it? I wonder if a lot of changes at Amazon, I suspect, over the last time, we're recording this in mid-December 2018, but I think an awful lot of things have been driven by the stock price just shooting down about whatever it was, 9% at its peak. So I think that they're just trying to make actually money, which is new for Amazon. Yeah. And therefore they're being really tight with their money. I think a lot of it's driven by that, but that is particularly kind of mean, isn't it? Hi, I've got this piece of paper here that proves what you're saying is correct, but I refuse to share it with you. It's your job to share it with me. I mean, that's
exactly
particularly horrible. Even as relations between Amazon and third-party sellers go, that's a new low, really.
It's very low.
Yeah. Okay. So what it comes down to is very simply keep your manufacturer invoices, demand with menaces from your logistics provider that they give you the proof of delivery stamped by Amazon paper. So I suppose I'm just trying to think, if I'm based in London in the UK and I sell in the US, for example. So I guess I'm going to have to ask somebody in Amazon US to physically post something all the way back to the UK just so we got it here. If we
usually I think the logistics should be able to give you a scanned copy.
Well, okay, so that's presumably enough, is it, a scanned copy?
Yeah, as long as it's as long as it's some kind of scanned file.
Okay, so you can get them to send you a scanned copy of that. Yeah. Okay, so that's one of those things one should just keep as part of the delivery process, or the inbound shipping process, I should say.
That's the ideal one. On occasion, you will get some agents, if you just show them an electronic, online UPS says that this shipment was delivered on this day. Amazon can also take that as proof without the stamp. if it's just some electronic version. But again, it kind of depends on the mood of the agent that day. So
yeah,
sometimes you send them this, and then the agent says, well, I need to see the stamped version.
okay.
Like,
So the safe way against the sort of vagaries of Amazon's very variable agents, is going to be to get the scanned version of something with stamp on it that was once a physical piece of paper. Okay, got you. Well, that's a really, if nothing else, and that could save over the course of a year, that could save somebody with a lot of SKUs a lot of money. So that's your golden nugget right there. So that sounds like a simple, easy, nice win. Interesting. And what happens then with SalesZoom if somebody has a need for documentation, but you guys have taken the task off their hands? Presumably you have to go back to the sellers and say, have you got pieces of paper for this, and this? Okay.
Correct.
So
so that's the tricky part, is because we don't, a lot of times we won't, have access to these documents. So with a lot of our current sellers, we have pretty good relationships with them that we can ask them, these are all the shipments that need documents, send over whatever ones you have. And we are discovering that the bigger the company is, the harder it is to just, we're like, all we need is this one document for this one shipment, but we're talking to one person who has to talk to another person, who has to talk to another person, who has to, it's like playing the, I don't know if you have it over in the UK, the telephone game.
I've heard of it, yeah.
You whisper into one person's ear, and then they whisper the same thing down, and it's
we call it Chinese whispers, which is probably basically
this is literal Chinese whispers with our Chinese customers.
Yeah.
And I will tell someone who tells someone who tells someone, and then we get this document. It's like an Excel file, and I'm like, Amazon stamp. That's all I need. Amazon.
File. That I'm glad to hear you have that experience with Chinese manufacturers. I mean, I have to say I find the same experience with them. Like, you ask a question, they answer and almost the same question, but not the same question. And then you go back and ask them the exact question you want in, and then you get the answer to a slightly different question again, but still isn't the answer. So, and I'm sure that happens in corporate America as well. I'm unfortunately not had many dealings with that. Okay, so look, it sounds like if you keep your paperwork, and now at least we know what paperwork to insist on from our logistics providers, that is fairly straightforward. The inbound shipping thing can be dealt with pretty straightforwardly now, even though Amazon's being nasty about it, should we say politely. Tell us about customer returns, because I can imagine that once you include the customer, who's also a capricious beast, in the mix, that it starts to get more complex.
Mm-hmm. So this one is... the main thing is customers just not returning the products within the window frame, or not at all. They just don't even return the product at all. The hard part with this is the hard part that all reimbursement services have is, this is one really big issue, is because a lot of sellers will, what Amazon calls a seller initiated reimbursement, where for FBA policy, Amazon is the one who is supposed to be handling all of the customer return process. But a customer will contact the seller directly and say, hey, I want a reimbursement for this product. And then the seller will say, the correct way should be directing them to Amazon customer support, and the Amazon agent will be the one who issues them the reimbursement. But a lot of times sellers who just want to take care of the problem and provide a better customer experience is just say, I will refund you right now, and they will go in and click the refund order. The problem is, if that customer does not return the product, Amazon will know that the seller was the one who provided the reimbursement, and Amazon will say, you went outside of FBA policy, you do not get reimbursed for this. It also is possible that the seller just tells the customer, here's your refund, and don't worry about returning the product. The problem is that we see on the software side of the reports, we download these reports and we're looking at the reports. We don't necessarily see this communication that's going on between the seller and the buyer, and we just think that it's, this customer maliciously did not return the product, when that isn't the case at all. So this is a bit trickier situation. But this one, we usually just go off of seller behavior. So if we kind of see this seller initiating behavior happen regularly, then we realize this is just this, what we kind of, we just kind of stop filing. We stop kind of looking for this opportunity for the seller because we realize that the seller is a bit more apt to kind of sidestep the policy to provide a better customer experience.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think it's worth addressing this because the most important thing, I think, for most sellers is to avoid negative reviews, because even if you spend quite a large amount of money and you avoid one negative review, let's say it's a newish product you've launched recently, or it's in a small marketplace where there isn't much volume. If you have 50 reviews and you get one or two one-star reviews, that could suddenly bring your average down half a star. And my experiences, we all know that normally pulls the conversion rates in half, which is just horrendous financially. Right. So it's probably worth, even for a modest SKU, several $100s to avoid one negative review. And for something that's doing really well but doesn't have that many reviews, but there's a lot of sales volume at stake, it's probably worth thousands. So that is one of those things that people do, and there's a very legitimate business reason. But I think what you're implying is it's probably a good idea to make it a policy and formalize it, and then communicate that to people like yourselves so that everybody knows where they stand. So look, our policy is we never ask anyone to return any item unless its value is over X dollars, $30, say $50 or something. I mean, I certainly, if I had a $5 widget that I was selling for $20, I never wanted them to return it, because I don't want it to be going back into the system and a defective product be potentially sent to a customer. So very definitely did not want it in the system, which is a different reason again, right? So I think as long as one has a clear policy about that, and it's a policy rather than just something you kind of do but isn't clear, then you communicate with people like yourselves. So just something to reflect on there. Because there are very legitimate reasons for doing it. Equally, I know some people who don't, and that's fair enough if you've got expensive products as well. Okay. So that's one issue that makes sense that you've got to be clear about. So what happens then if we're not in that situation? What's the way forward to find out about getting money back out of Amazon that they owe us?
So this one is, again, the concept of it is very straightforward. You look at your refund report and you look at your customer return report, and you just line up the two. You will just see every single order that was refunded, and then you just check if those orders were in fact actually returned. So
what were those reports again? Sorry, it's the refund report and the
customer return report.
Customer return report. Okay.
So the refund one you get from the payments tab in your Seller Central. There's a report and then there's payments. And in there, in the transaction view, you can find this, you can sort all the refunded orders. And then you cross-reference that with the customer return report, which is the report that gets generated whenever an item goes back to the returns warehouse. So I think in the US, like the Las Vegas and I think in Kentucky. So there are two warehouses that are specifically for customer returns. I think Las Vegas, for the US market, I think Las Vegas is the West Coast and Kentucky is East Coast. So if you check your customer return reports, every single customer return is being returned to Las Vegas or Kentucky. There might be a Miami in there on occasion. But these are customer return processing warehouses. After they get processed, they will then get redistributed back out to the normal warehouses, depending on if it's sellable, if it's unsellable, whatnot. So it's at the initial facility that Amazon is determining what is the condition of the product. And then, for example, so let's say a customer returns a product that's it's still sellable. So Amazon then needs to actually send this product back to, Ontario 8, which is down in Southern California. So now they have to send this product from Las Vegas to Southern California. You then have to check a second report to verify that the item checked into Ontario 8. And that doesn't always happen.
Right. So, which report is that one then?
That's the inventory event report. So, just because you check the customer return report doesn't mean it's actually going back into your inventory. And the same goes also for unsellable product. You do have unsellable product that Amazon says, I'm going to return to your inventory, that they don't, for some reason or another, it doesn't actually appear in your unsellable inventory. So this is, so a lot of people will ask me, can we ask for reimbursement for customer damaged products? And I say no, but if Amazon loses that customer damaged product, you can ask for reimbursement. So and that actually happens not very often, but it happens often enough.
Okay. So the customer damaged product, this is another simple golden nugget, is that customer damaged products will not get reimbursement from Amazon. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So in theory, you could chase the customer up and ask them for money back. And that will be really fun when they leave a 1-star review, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's the only way to get the money back, right? Or just accept that it's cost of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. It's the cost of doing FBA business.
FBA business.
Right.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's worth knowing. So, I mean, at least we're not going to spend, a lot of time and energy training up a VA to go and bang their head against a brick wall there. So if a customer's damaged your stuff, it's tough luck. And I guess, to be fair, I mean, Amazon's created this very, very customer-centric business model. That's why they get people signing up for it. That's why they get incredible conversion rates. And the downside of that is that they act like spoiled children. So I suppose you're going to have to take both sides of that equation. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that's the DIY and that stuff. So there's obviously a lot of detail that goes into any given one of these issues with the reports you've got to check and double check and cross check and allow for nuances. Like, the seller has a tendency to reimburse people themselves and things like that. Right. So how do you guys deal with, or how can anyone who's trying to do it, deal with that mixture of detail, but also the volume, because the volume of transactions, even with a relatively modest number of SKUs, presumably ends up pretty damn high, because you've got one transactions, presumably by the sound of it, can end up in about 6 or 7 reports. So what's the solution for kind of the mix of detail and volume that you've got to deal with in this situation?
As a seller?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that as a seller first, and then we'll talk about how you guys handle it as well.
So as a seller, if you are, I would just say, if you are savvy enough with Microsoft Excel, you can create an infrastructure of formulas and cross-referencing things, that if you basically build out an infrastructure, you could download these reports and just copy them into an Excel workbook that you already have these pre-made formulas. You can essentially speed up the work yourself. And, and whether you have 1 SKU or 100 SKUs, it's doing the same process of finding these discrepancies for you. If you're not good with this, good luck. Because it's once you reach a certain a number of volume, I would just say it's no possible way to, without the assistance of software, there's no way that you can do this to stay on top of it.
Okay, so sooner or later you're going to need software then, basically.
Exactly.
Okay, which is where you guys come in, I guess. So,
exactly.
So is what SalesZoom offers? It's a very important question. Actually, I should address this. Is it something that is purely software that the users would interface with directly, or you've implied that there's a bit of human judgment going on? So do you have sort of account managers that deal with it as well?
Correct. So our software is downloading all the reports, and so, for example, in the case of the customer returns, that if we're having a consistent fail rate with these tickets, this can trigger a flag for an account manager to reach out to the seller and say, we noticed that this type is failing more often than not. Is this your kind of company policy? And working with the seller that way and figuring out if they have certain tendencies to do ways. I've personally worked with some sellers where, so some sellers say, give me a list of 200 orders that haven't been returned, and I will sort through and tell you which ones I initiated the refund myself. Which we were like, well, if you want to do the footwork,
fair enough, yeah.
So the seller took a weekend. He sat down, he went through 200 orders, and he just checked yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, and he gave the document back to us, and then it worked from there. Well, we do have some other sellers who just say, no, I don't want to do the footwork. And so sometimes we'll have account managers just spend, spend 2 hours on your Saturday and go through and make sure you kind of go through their account and make sure we don't file any bad tickets for them.
Yeah.
So we do have, there's always exceptions where we do have a more human heavy interaction with everything to make sure we do things correctly.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So you got a nice blend of sort of human machine interface there, and
Right.
makes a lot of sense. So talking about that, on the other side of the equation in Amazon, obviously they have very sort of rigid, sometimes not one thinks particularly well architected computer systems, but there they go.
Right.
And then definitely very variable human element in the sense of probably very badly trained employees, or they certainly come across that way. So how do you deal with that sort of variability in the Amazon system?
As far as the agents answering?
The agents, yeah.
And if you sell in the European marketplaces, good luck, because I have discovered the Amazon agents who do support in EU are horribly trained. You send them stuff where you say, hey, there are 10 items that were damaged, and they reply back, oh, we didn't find any lost items. What are you talking about? And you're like, my email very clearly says damaged.
Yeah.
There's no room for a misunderstanding here. This has come from going through thousands of messages. For me personally, because I was brought in to Sales Zoom about a year ago to kind of, they had a basic structure of the product, but it was to really, hey, we need to make sure that this is streamlined and everything is within policy and we're doing things correctly. And so to figure out how to best go through this, circus of Amazon ticket filing was to just simply go through hundreds and thousands of messages with different agents and basically figure out these scenarios are whenever we have bad agents. These scenarios are agents who just, they're not being, because you do get some agents who are just being very lazy and just say, I'm closing this ticket. You do have some that, so in the case of, so going back to the customer return report, an item gets checked in and then Amazon says, I'm going to return it to your inventory. You then have to check the inventory event report and line these up. A lot of Amazon agents don't actually know about that. They just see the customer return report and they say, oh, it says it was returned. And we have to reply back, we're not saying it wasn't returned. We're saying it wasn't returned to the warehouse that it's supposed to. It was checked into Vegas, but it didn't check into Ontario. And so that a lot of times the agents say, oh, okay, now I see what you're saying. And so this is a case of just the Amazon agents are not well trained to understand what is actually going on. And that's the frustrating part. You try to, we even specifically formulate in our messages. We know it was checked in, but we don't see it in the inventory event, but you still get these Amazon agents who don't read the messages.
So you basically need somebody at the seller side, or what you guys do, who understands the possible missing information, the things that the agents are missing that they should be knowing but don't, and kind of gently, politely point that out to them. Say, okay, I understand that it's in the customer report. What we didn't see is in XYZ report, this event A, and then you can actually spell it out to them, and at that point, then they can do their job.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. So there is an art in all these different areas, and like in suspension, which is a deeply unpleasant area, obviously for a lot of us. But there is an art to reading between the lines. And then sometimes this is not about reading between the lines; it's the opposite. It's like the agents didn't know the lines were there to be read. That's not a very good metaphor, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Okay. So you guys obviously got a massive handle on all this stuff. I mean, I have to say, as I said before, there are many areas where it's lovely when an expert comes on and talks about the area they do and then gently mentions their service at the end. You might possibly want to do it, but most people will do it themselves. This feels very much like an area that a lot of people will want to outsource, particularly if there's no monthly minimum, which sounds very powerful. So tell us a little bit more about, if people want to go ahead and use your service, how they do that.
So there is the onboarding process, which we get API access to your account. So it's through your Seller Central API access is how we download all of these reports. The one very frustrating part is which I have learned, is Amazon's information in Amazon's API is not always the same information that you see on Seller Central, which is a hugely frustrating thing because so sometimes the information that we get in the API doesn't actually line up with the Seller Central information. And then in Amazon, they say, oh, yeah, the report you're looking at doesn't have all the information. And you're kind of like, come on, guys. Like, you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Surely you can, have the stuff line up. But yeah, we integrate in with your Seller Central. We will get access to all the different reports. So we will handle the case creation, the case follow-up. And then on Refund Hunter, so I guess we should actually, now that I think of it, we have to give you a special link for you. We can give folks a special promotion after you get this aired out, that they can get a discount on, I think it will be, we've always changed it for different events. Sometimes it's like a $15 credit. Sometimes it's a $50 credit. We'll have to figure out. But,
all right. Well, we'll put that in the show notes. So
and it'll take people straight to the sign up page.
It's, if people want to access that, we'll just go to amazingfba.com/saleszoom SALESZOOM or Z. So that's fine. We'll figure that out. But certainly you'll be able to do some kind of deal for the listeners, and that makes sense. So how do you charge? Because we didn't ask about that. I mean, okay, there's no minimum charge. Do you take a percentage of refunds that you get?
Correct. So we take 25% of whatever we get reimbursed back. So, and this is, so how we line it up is we line up any reimbursement that was given due to our ticket. So in the reimbursement report, you have your reimbursement ID column, and then you have a case ID column. So typically it would be our ticket 123 that initiated this reimbursement. It will be in the reimbursement report. The seller gets, his money deposited into his regular Amazon account, that whatever bank account or credit card he has linked to his selling store. And then a couple weeks later, we will invoice the seller with a detailed invoice of every reimbursement ID along with the case ID that we created for them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So basically you're going to do it by invoice rather than taking it off them straight up front. But yeah, 25%. Okay. It's a healthy percentage, but I guess the question is whether people would have actually got that reimbursement or not, I suppose.
Right.
It depends how you look at it, and you've got to figure this stuff out for yourself, obviously. I mean, if you're good with pivot tables, as you say, and you can set up with VAs, sure, you can do it in-house. On the other hand, if your money's sitting there and you're not actually going to get round to getting it reimbursed at all because you're just too damn busy, then I guess it makes a lot of sense to outsource it and say, you know what, you handle this and you can get a healthy fee and we'll take the money that was never going to be there anyway. So yeah, interesting. Yeah, so it depends on people's situation sort of to make a judgment on that. But yeah, okay, interesting. So that's how people go for that. If they want to go for it. So we'll set up a link, as I said, amazingfba.com/saleszoom for this interview, which will also have any links if people want to sign up for that and go ahead. Any other things people would need to know to use SalesZoom's actual service?
I guess going back to your point, sometimes people do like to have VAs. We have come across quite a few customers who say, they currently have VAs do this. And I always tell them, you can sign up and let us know to not file tickets for you. And then we can show you a potential earning of what we think is there. So we had a seller a couple months ago. He's like, oh, no, yeah, I have a VA take care of this for me. I said, all right. I said, well, sign up. We won't file tickets for you, but just take a look at your potential earning. I think it still came out to like $3,000. So it's like, despite having a VA, there are these other situations that for some, we're not going to get 100% of that, but it's, we'll get a healthy chunk of that back. And so there's nothing wrong with, I even have told some people, you can have your VAs look for the damage and lost situations. We'll turn that fee, we'll turn those ticket types off for you. And we're just going to worry about these other kind of niche areas that are harder to find.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, good. Well, that's very sensible to hear. So, in other words, you can just, your service for a big seller. I mean, 25% could be potentially a lot of money, but on the other hand, if they weren't going to get it back anyway because it's just too specialist, or the amount of manpower that I would actually, even with a big number of, if you got across a lot of SKUs, the manpower might still be in-house, just too expensive to make it viable. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you can really pick and pack, you can sort of mix and match.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, good. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that people can explore working with you or actually work with you rather than just taking one sort of big package. That's very worth knowing.
Correct. Yeah.
So now we discussed this about this podcast quite a while ago. I hear rumors that you've got a PPC optimization software that is also going to become available.
Yes.
How are things going with that?
That is still in the works.
Oh, hang on, Ben. We've frozen up. We managed to get pretty much all the way through without things happening. Right, let me just stop here.